You ever notice how some people lose interest in you the moment you stop reacting? The moment you stop explaining yourself, defending your peace, or proving your worth, they fade. Not because you changed, but because you stopped feeding the part of them that needed control. See, every toxic person has one thing in common. They thrive where your emotions live. They don't need truth. They need tension. They need your spark to keep their shadow alive. But here's the secret. When you detach, you disarm them. I'm not talking about ignoring people or acting cold. I'm talking about rising above the noise with so much peace that their chaos can't breathe around you anymore, because peace is not passive. It's power that doesn't flinch. When you stop reacting, you start revealing. You reveal who's genuinely with you and who is just with your reactions. You'll see it. Suddenly the conversations feel one-sided. The drama stops calling your name. The manipulation can't find a door, because peace doesn't answer to dysfunction. And that's when they walk away. Not because you told them to, but because your energy no longer gives them oxygen. You've stopped being a mirror for their insecurity, and they can't stand looking at themselves anymore. Here's the one thing. Detach with dignity. Not anger, not ego, just calm clarity. The kind that says, I'm not available for that version of me anymore. Because every time you choose peace over proving, you rewrite your identity. Every time you pause instead of reacting, you teach your spirit who's really in control. And every time you walk away from chaos, you're walking toward purpose. Toxic people will test your silence. They'll poke at it, mock it, try to pull you back into the dance. Don't move, don't argue, just breathe. Silence is not weakness. It's wisdom taking form. It's heaven whispering, you've outgrown this level. Detach, not to punish them, but to free yourself, because the higher you rise in peace, the harder it is for confusion to find you. And when you finally understand that not every battle deserves your voice, you'll realize something powerful. You didn't lose them. They lost access. Access to your peace, access to your energy, access to your spirit, and that's when life starts to shift. You stop chasing validation. You stop explaining your worth. You stop apologizing for protecting your peace. So do this one thing. Detach with grace. Stand in your truth so completely that those who once thrived on your reaction won't recognize you anymore. They'll walk away because your peace became too loud for their noise. Detachment is not indifference. It's spiritual clarity. It's not about turning off your emotions or pretending not to care. It's about seeing life, people, and situations as they are, not as your fears, attachments, or expectations want them to be. When you truly detach, you don't lose compassion. You just stop confusing chaos for connection. You stop mistaking emotional intensity for intimacy. You begin to understand that love can exist without control, that care doesn't require you to abandon yourself, and that peace is not found in fixing others, but in freeing yourself. Detachment is a quiet kind of strength. It's standing in the middle of emotional noise and not letting it dictate your response. It's realizing that your reaction is your responsibility, not their reward. You don't chase explanations anymore because you understand that understanding doesn't always come from others. Sometimes it's born from silence, from letting things be unfinished, from releasing the need to prove your heart to people who have already decided not to see it. When you operate from spiritual clarity, you no longer take everything personally. You see that people act from their own pain, their own patterns, their own level of awareness. You stop fighting their blindness and start protecting your vision. You begin to move with intention instead of reaction. And that's where real power is, not in being untouched, but in being unshaken. Detachment gives you perspective. It lets you see what serves your growth and what drains it. It teaches you that sometimes love means stepping back, not stepping in. That not every conflict needs resolution, not every invitation to chaos needs a reply. It's understanding that peace isn't found by winning arguments, but by refusing to participate in them. This kind of clarity doesn't make you cold. It makes you conscious. You can still love deeply, but you do it from wholeness, not from need. You can still care, but you no longer collapse. You can still be kind, but you stop being consumed. Detachment isn't walking away from people. It's walking away from illusions. It's the sacred balance between compassion and boundaries, where you hold love in one hand and peace in the other, and you never let one cost you the other. Toxic people feed on reactions. Silence starves their power. They live off the energy you release when you defend, explain, or try to make them see your heart. Every time you respond to manipulation, every time you argue with distortion, you're giving them exactly what they came for: attention, validation, and emotional fuel. They don't need to be right. They just need you to react. Because the moment you react, you've stepped into their arena where logic doesn't live and peace can't survive. Silence, on the other hand, is not weakness. It's a weapon of wisdom. It's choosing to no longer be a participant in someone else's dysfunction. It's understanding that arguing with someone committed to misunderstanding you is like fighting smoke. The harder you swing, the less you see. Silence doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care too much about your peace to let someone else pollute it. It's self-control wrapped in grace. It's the deep awareness that your energy is sacred and not everyone deserves access to it. Toxic people use reaction as proof of control. When you get angry, they feel powerful. When you justify yourself, they feel validated. But when you stay silent, calm, unmoved, and grounded, they lose their script. They start fumbling, over-explaining, or even provoking harder because they can't stand not being able to pull you out of alignment. That's when you know your silence is working, because silence doesn't just end arguments. It reveals them. It shows who is seeking peace and who is seeking power. There's a certain spiritual authority in silence. It says, I refuse to be moved by anything smaller than peace. It's not passive. It's disciplined restraint. It's the ability to stand firm when your ego wants to fight back, and instead, let truth speak in time. Silence removes the oxygen from manipulation. It dismantles confusion. It turns noise into reflection. Eventually, toxic people walk away, not because you push them out, but because they can't breathe in the atmosphere of peace you now carry. They need drama to survive. And when you stop feeding it, their grip breaks. Silence becomes your shield, not to hide behind, but to stand behind. Strong, calm, and untouchable. When you stop defending yourself, you start defining yourself. For most of your life, you've probably been conditioned to explain your intentions, justify your choices, and prove your worth to people who never intended to understand you in the first place. You thought if you just said it right, they'd finally see your heart. But here's the truth. People committed to misunderstanding, you don't need more explanation. They need your absence. The more you try to defend yourself, the smaller you become, because you're fighting for validation in a space that was never built for your truth. Defending yourself keeps you trapped in the court of opinion, where other people hold the gavel over your peace. But when you stop defending, when you finally drop the need to convince, something sacred happens. Your energy shifts from proving to becoming. You move from being reactive to being rooted. You realize that your life, your consistency, and your peace are the only explanations you'll ever need, because truth doesn't fight. It stands. Defending yourself is often fear disguised as reason, fear that you'll be misunderstood, rejected, or labeled. But here's the revelation. You can't protect your peace and your image at the same time. The more you try to manage perception, the further you drift from authenticity. But when you stop defending, you stop performing, you stop bending to fit narratives that were never yours to begin with. You define yourself not by what others say, but by what you embody daily. Calm, clarity, and quiet confidence. When you stop defending, you reclaim your time and energy. You stop replaying conversations in your head, stop writing speeches that will never be heard, stop trying to make people comfortable with your growth. You begin to trust that truth always reveals itself, even if it takes time. You start to live like your peace is proof enough, and in doing so, you begin to define who you are, not in reaction to their version of you, but in alignment with your own. You don't owe explanations to people who question your peace. You owe commitment to the person you're becoming the moment you stop defending yourself. You send a clear message to the world, I know who I am, and I no longer need your approval to be it. Emotional control is not about suppressing feelings. It's about mastering what deserves your energy. Too many people mistake control for coldness, as if being calm means you don't care. But emotional control isn't about shutting down. It's about showing up with awareness. It's the power to feel deeply without being led blindly. It's knowing when to speak and when to be still, when to engage and when to release. Because not every emotion deserves a reaction, and not every reaction deserves your peace. When you start mastering your emotions, you begin to see how much of your energy was being drained by impulse. You notice how often your peace was traded for the satisfaction of being right or for the illusion of control. Emotional maturity is realizing that not every offense needs a defense, and not every wound needs to be reopened just because you feel pain. It's recognizing the difference between feeling something and feeding it. You can acknowledge anger without acting on it. You can experience hurt without letting it turn into hatred. You can love someone and still know they're not good for your growth. That's real control, not suppression, but selection. Emotional control is spiritual strength in motion. It's being tested and choosing peace anyway. It's having every reason to react, but choosing to respond with grace. It's the quiet understanding that the moment you lose control, you hand your power over to the very thing that tried to disrupt you. People will test your composure just to see if they can still reach the old version of you. When they can't, they'll say you've changed, and they'll be right, because control means you've evolved beyond the need for validation through chaos. You stop giving temporary emotions permanent authority. You stop letting pain narrate your story. You stop letting your peace depend on how others act. You start living from a place of grounded confidence, the kind that doesn't need to prove, doesn't need to chase, doesn't need to win. Because winning is not about having the last word, it's about keeping your peace intact. Emotional control is not silence out of fear, it's silence out of strength. It's the art of staying centered while the world tries to pull you off balance. Boundaries aren't walls, they're gates of wisdom that decide who gets access to your peace. They're not about cutting people off, they're about protecting what keeps you whole. A boundary is not a punishment, it's a reflection of value. It's saying, I love myself enough to protect my energy, my time, and my truth. When you set boundaries, you're not creating distance, you're creating direction. You're teaching people how to walk with you without walking over you. Many people fear boundaries because they think it will make them seem harsh, distant, or unkind, but in truth, boundaries are one of the purest forms of love. Love for yourself and clarity for others. They keep relationships healthy by defining where respect lives and where manipulation dies. Without boundaries, you become emotionally scattered, giving pieces of yourself to every demand and expectation. You start confusing self-sacrifice with compassion and exhaustion with love. But boundaries remind you that love without limits isn't love. It's self-neglect. When you set boundaries, people who are benefiting from your lack of them will call you selfish. They'll say you've changed, and you've grown, you've realized that peace is not found in pleasing everyone, but in staying aligned with your values. Boundaries aren't about saying no to people. They're about saying yes to your peace, your priorities, and your purpose. They create space for authentic connection because they remove the need for pretense and performance. The wisdom of boundaries is that they don't just keep negativity out. They keep authenticity in. They allow you to give from overflow, not emptiness. They help you discern the difference between someone who deserves access and someone who only seeks advantage. And most importantly, boundaries give you back your power, the power to choose where your energy flows. Setting boundaries is an act of spiritual clarity. It's the point where self-respect meets grace. It's not about rejecting others, it's about refusing to reject yourself. And once you learn that peace is sacred, you stop apologizing for protecting it. Because every boundary you set is a declaration of worth. It says, I will not shrink to make room for disrespect. Boundaries don't separate you from love. They safeguard the space where real love can exist. When you rise in self-respect, people who survive on your insecurity will fall away naturally. The moment you start honoring your worth, the world around you begins to rearrange itself. You'll notice that the same people who once praised your humility may start to resent your confidence. The ones who benefited from your doubt will begin to distance themselves, not because you've done something wrong, but because your light no longer feeds their shadow. Self-respect doesn't chase approval, it commands alignment. It creates a vibration that no longer matches the frequency of manipulation, and that's why certain people can't stay when you start to stand tall. Self-respect is quiet but powerful. It's not arrogance, it's awareness. It's knowing who you are and refusing to negotiate that truth. When you truly respect yourself, you stop seeking love through suffering and attention through sacrifice. You stop explaining your boundaries and start enforcing them with calm certainty. You stop overgiving to prove your goodness, and you start giving from wholeness instead of emptiness. The moment you choose self-respect, you stop auditioning for spaces you were born to own. People who feed on your insecurity thrive on your uncertainty. They depend on your self-doubt to maintain control, to feel needed, or to keep you small. But when you rise, when you start speaking with confidence, walking with purpose, and loving yourself without apology, they begin to suffocate in the air of your self-assurance. You no longer bend to please them, and without your compliance, they lose their influence. That's why some people disappear when you grow. They were never attached to you, only to your need for them. Self-respect changes your environment because it changes your energy. It teaches you that silence can be stronger than argument, And distance can speak louder than confrontation. It gives you permission to walk away without resentment and to love without losing yourself. And as your respect for yourself deepens, your standards rise. You start attracting people who see your worth without discounting it, who celebrate your strength instead of competing with it. The truth is, the more you respect yourself, the fewer explanations you'll owe and the more peace you'll own, because real self-respect doesn't demand attention, it draws it. It's not loud, it's luminous. And those who can't stand the light will always walk away on their own. Peace doesn't chase, explain, or beg to be understood. It just stands still and lets truth reveal itself. Real peace is not something you perform, it's something you embody. It doesn't need to convince anyone because it knows what it carries. When you truly walk in peace, you stop trying to control how others perceive you because you've learned that perception is not your responsibility. Alignment is. You understand that truth always finds its way through time, and that chasing validation only delays the calm your soul craves. Peace is powerful because it doesn't run after what is already fading, it simply lets what's meant to stay, stay. When you reach that level of inner stillness, you stop over-explaining your choices. You stop trying to justify your boundaries, your silence, your distance. You start realizing that those who need constant explanation aren't looking for truth, they're looking for control. But peace doesn't perform for control. It doesn't plead to be accepted. It doesn't fight to be seen. It just exists, quietly and confidently, trusting that clarity will come when it's supposed to. Peace is not passive. It's strong restraint. It's choosing not to match the chaos around you. It's letting people think what they want while you rest in what you know. That kind of calm shakes people who feed on drama because they can't manipulate what doesn't react. They can't argue with stillness. They can't provoke someone who's already surrendered their need to win. When you walk in peace, you stop chasing closure from those who broke you. You stop explaining your silence to those who misunderstood it. You stop defending your healing journey to those who don't honor it. You understand that peace doesn't need to prove its purity, it just needs to protect it. It's the quiet confidence that says, I don't need to be understood to be at peace, I just need to be aligned with truth. And that's when something beautiful happens. The noise around you starts to fade. The opinions lose their hold. The misunderstandings stop mattering. Because when you carry true peace, you realize that silence is not emptiness. It's evidence. It's proof that you've learned to trust life enough to let truth speak for itself. You can't heal in the same place that keeps reopening your wounds. Healing requires distance. Not just physical, but emotional and spiritual. You cannot expect peace to grow in soil poisoned by the same energy that broke you. Sometimes, the most courageous act of self-love is to walk away from what feels familiar but continues to fracture your spirit. Familiar pain can be deceiving. It feels safe only because you've known it for so long, but healing demands that you step into the unknown, into spaces that don't constantly remind you of who you were when you were hurting. Staying where the wound was made only deepens the scar. You start to believe the pain is your identity instead of your experience. You start shrinking to survive instead of expanding to recover. Healing asks for silence, for separation, for solitude, not as a form of punishment, but as a sacred reset. It's the stillness that allows your soul to remember what wholeness feels like. You can't keep touching what cut you and expect it to stop bleeding. The same conversations, the same cycles, the same people who refuse to change. They keep you tethered to the very pain you're praying to escape. Leaving the place of your pain doesn't mean you hate it. It means you finally understand it. You see it for what it taught you, not what it took from you. Healing is not about proving your strength by staying. It's about honoring your worth by leaving. Because the truth is, not everything broken needs to be fixed where it shattered. Some things can only be mended in new light, with new air, and around new energy that doesn't demand you to stay wounded to belong. And once you leave, the healing won't happen overnight, but slowly, peace will find its way back in. You'll notice the noise fading, the heaviness lifting, the clarity returning. You'll start to feel safe in your own company again. That's how you'll know you're healing, when the need to revisit the past no longer controls you, because healing isn't about pretending it never hurt. It's about finally being in a space where it doesn't anymore. You can't heal where you're still bleeding. You heal where peace has room to breathe. Spiritual maturity is realizing that walking away is sometimes the loudest form of love. It's understanding that not every relationship, argument, or season deserves to be prolonged just because your heart is loyal. True love, the kind rooted in wisdom, not attachment, knows when to release what no longer aligns with peace. Walking away isn't always rejection, sometimes it's reverence. It's saying, I love you enough not to destroy us both by staying where growth has stopped. It takes far more strength to leave with grace than to stay out of fear. Spiritual maturity teaches you that love is not measured by endurance alone. Staying in places that drain your spirit isn't love. It's self-abandonment disguised as devotion. Real love honors truth, and truth often whispers when it's time to let go. There's a sacred dignity in walking away without bitterness, without revenge, without the need to prove a point, because when love evolves into awareness, it stops needing to win. It simply seeks peace. When you reach that level of awareness, you stop trying to force closure. You understand that some endings won't come with explanations, and that's okay. You learn to trust the silence that follows the goodbye. You start to see that peace is not found in holding on tighter, but in releasing with an open hand. Walking away doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you care enough to protect your soul. It's love choosing healing over history, wholeness over habit. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself and others is to walk away quietly, to stop repeating the same pain and calling it love, to stop expecting change from someone who's comfortable in chaos. Spiritual maturity means you no longer need to prove your loyalty by suffering. It's realizing that peace is the highest form of affection, even if it means distance. You begin to understand that love can be both gentle and firm, compassionate yet clear. You can wish someone well and still walk away. You can forgive and still move on. You can love and still let go. Because when your soul matures, you stop chasing what disturbs your peace, and you start protecting the love that lives within you. Walking away becomes your final act of grace. The moment you stop trying to change people, you start changing your life. It's one of the hardest lessons to learn, that you cannot heal someone by sacrificing your own peace, and you cannot lead someone to self-awareness if they are committed to staying blind. For so long you may have believed that love meant fixing, saving, or convincing, but real love releases control. It understands that every soul has its own path, and your purpose isn't to rewrite someone else's journey, but to stay faithful to your own. When you finally let go of the need to change people, you reclaim all the energy you've been pouring into resistance, and you begin to pour it into transformation. Trying to change people is often rooted in a hidden fear of loss, fear of rejection, fear of seeing potential wasted. But potential isn't purpose. You can see the best in someone without making it your mission to bring it out of them. Because the truth is, people don't change when you push them, they change when they're ready. No amount of love can awaken a soul that's not willing to see itself. And when you accept that truth, peace enters. Letting go of control doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you care in a healthier way. You start loving without rescuing, supporting without fixing, giving without losing yourself. You realize that growth can't be forced, and wisdom can't be taught to a closed heart. You stop taking responsibility for someone else's choices and start taking responsibility for your own boundaries. That shift is freedom. When you stop trying to change others, your energy softens. Your presence becomes lighter. You begin to attract relationships that are rooted in mutual respect instead of imbalance. You find that peace replaces exhaustion, and clarity replaces confusion, because your focus turns inward to your healing, your purpose, your spiritual evolution. And in that space of surrender, you finally understand that influence doesn't come from force. It comes from example. People are inspired by your peace more than your pressure. When you stop trying to change them, you start showing them what change actually looks like. And that's when everything begins to align. Not because you controlled it, but because you released it. At some point, you realize the real battle was never with other people. It was within you. It was never about proving your worth, fixing broken things, or making everyone understand your heart. It was about learning to protect your peace, mastering your emotions, and standing firm in who you are without apology. The moment you choose peace over reaction, clarity over chaos, and detachment over desperation, life starts to transform around you. You begin to see that silence speaks louder than confrontation, that walking away can heal more than staying, and that peace isn't something you find, it's something you decide to live in. The toxic people, the draining cycles, the emotional storms, they all lose their power when you stop giving them access to your spirit. You don't have to fight for freedom when you learn to protect your energy. So let this truth settle deep within you. The strongest version of you isn't the one who can argue the best or love the hardest or endure the most. The strongest version of you is the one who can stand in peace while the world tries to provoke chaos, the one who knows when to speak, when to stay silent, and when to simply walk away. Because real power isn't loud, it's calm. Do this one thing, detach, not with bitterness, but with clarity. Release what drains you, protect what grows you, and never trade your peace for anyone's comfort. When you do that, the wrong people will fall away, and the right ones will rise to meet you at your frequency. That's not loss. That's alignment. That's when you'll understand that peace was never the absence of noise, it was the presence of strength.